Hey everyone, Andrew here. Just wanted to do a quick little video, I say quick, this took me quite a while, of the East games on the Nintendo Switch 2 and do a little comparison to the Nintendo Switch 1 while I'm at it. You know, it's going to be a good time, so let's start with an absolute banger. Here we go! So it's an absolute banger. That opening gets me every time. Thankfully, the good news here is that my report on performance is going to be very boring. So on Switch 2, we're looking at 1080p 60 FPS docked, which is about what you would expect for a game like this. Handheld mode, 720p 60 FPS there as well. Basically, no matter which way you play it, you're getting a locked 60. Really great, no frame pacing issues. Just overall really high quality, good fun. Which leads into the Nintendo Switch version. So this is why I said this is going to be a little bit boring. So basically, performance is going to be the same across the board. 1080p 60 FPS docked, 720p 60 FPS handheld mode. So as you can see, there's really hardly any difference in terms of performance here, as it is virtually identical on the Switch 2, which is a good thing, because no matter which console you're on, you're basically getting a consistent experience, just across the board. It runs very well on the original Switch and is absolutely worth your time. From one banger to the next, we're going to be looking at another classic. This is a remake of the third East game. This is East Memoir, The Oath in Felghana. And let me know if you heard this one before. 1080p 60 FPS docked, 720p 60 FPS in handheld mode on the Switch 2. It's going to be another boring report because, shocker, older East games don't really require that much to run well, and same thing as Origin. It's basically virtually identical between both platforms. I will show a brief snippet of the Switch 1 gameplay here, and I would not be surprised if this looked virtually identical. Again, 1080p 60 FPS docked, 720p 60 FPS handheld. These games run great. Not surprising given the engine. These games are, of course, you know, these are the classics, right? This is remake of The Wanderer's Ease, like absolutely worth your time. If you're curious and want an old school action RPG, this game gets really fast paced and brutal. Highly recommended. Definitely worth looking into. I have the Japanese copy, as you can see here. I imported it not knowing that they were going to make a English localization, which has since happened. And yeah, I don't regret it. This game's great. I don't have any issues playing it in Japanese because it's East, it's an action RPG. You can kind of figure out where you're going pretty easily. And overall, I just think this is a very fun series. Like these earlier games, I think they're gems in their own right, and I think everyone should try them at least once. You know, if you're not necessarily looking for, like, you know, the newest games in the series, I think you can get these on a pretty good budget usually. And I feel like I've been rambling a little bit, so I think it's time we move on to our next game. Boy, oh boy, do I have a treat for you, ladies and gentlemen. Here he comes. Don't worry, he's coming. I swear, here he comes. There he is. The true legend of East. The really awkwardly animated cat. I love him. You love him. Don't lie. His presence means a banger is on the way. Yes, so this is actually a really cool game. This is kind of the in-between from East 7 and East 8 in terms of game design. The 3D models in this game are, they're a little different. So East 7, for context, had really chibi looking 3D model characters, and you know, I really liked that. It was a really good step in the right direction for the franchise. But this game introduced 3D models that are a little more realistically, what's the word I'm looking for? Proportion, I guess you should say. Big thing to know is Falcom does not have a huge budget with these games, so they kind of work with what they got, and honestly, they do really good work, especially with the gameplay focus and the music and the world building, and the characters are lovable too. Anyways, enough of me gushing. Let's look at this game. So right off the bat, I have to bring this up. This game is not quite as well balanced as the previous two entries I discussed. I will show you very briefly what I mean, and specifically this town here. Like, so in this opening town, you get a little bit of a chance to run around a bit, and this is kind of a weird one. So this is where performance issues on the Switch 1 kind of start happening. I don't really know why it is, but here in this town on Switch 1, which is what you're looking at right now, there's some really awful frame pacing that's occurring here. It might be a little hard to make out, but there's a bit of a stutter as the scene moves about, and it's just really bizarre for what's about to happen next that I'm going to show you all. Yeah, I don't know why, but for some reason it's really stuttery, really gross and strange on Switch 1 compared to Switch 2. But here's where things get a little interesting. So dungeons and combat. So we're looking at Switch 2 right now. This is, the game runs pretty well, 60 frames per second, pretty much locked the entire time. It's pretty much consistent on Switch 2. Like, you're not ever going to really see any drop frames on this, especially not in combat. This is kind of the interesting thing right about here is regarding the Switch 1 version. See, in combat on the Switch 1 version and in the dungeons in general, it seems to maintain a 60 frames per second frame rate. Yeah, there might be a little awkward frame pacing here and there, but overall it's actually pretty impressive. Very different from what we were seeing in like the town on Switch 1. It just seems to be a much more consistent frame rate, and just overall feels pretty good on Switch 1. Even the bosses, like, so here we'll go back to the Switch 2 really quick and show off the boss fight. And as you can see, it's running just fine. No issues, no frame pacing problems, 60 frames per second. Overall, just a really clean and fun experience, very consistent, just feels really good to play. Which leads us to the Switch 1, which actually impressed me quite a bit with how well it held up. So the frame rate basically maintains itself at 60 for the most part. There are a couple weird instances of frame pacing issues, but it's really nothing major. After experiencing the town the way I did, I kind of anticipated that this would be a little bit heavy for the Switch 1, And even when using a special move like you're about to see here, like, it still kept up really well, even with all the effects on screen. I know, like, this is a Vita game originally, so I know it should perform pretty well. That's why it's such an interesting scenario. Like, the town wasn't running that well. These boss fights, the parts that matter, run pretty well, and I think that's huge, honestly. This just tells me that, no matter which console, Switch 1 or Switch 2, Memoir and Celceta is a fantastic experience. One of the cooler, more modern East games, in my opinion, like, at least of the handheld generation. East 7 will always be my favorite of the handheld East games, but Memoir and Celceta is very good, and I highly recommend it, pretty much regardless if you're on Switch 1 or 2. Alright, so we're moving into the big leagues now. These are the games that I think most people are going to care the most for. And fun fact, this game, as of this recording, turns 9 today. So next year we're going to be talking about a 10th anniversary for this game, which is really crazy to me. So this is Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Donna. This game is very special. This was the first true full 3D Ys game to be released by Falcom. And let me tell you, this game is what I would say is a modern classic, a genuine gem that you need to play if you are even remotely into action RPGs or JRPGs even, and any kind of RPGs. This game is fantastic, amazing characters, phenomenal soundtrack. This is Falcom's first true 3D game, and I mean, yeah, sure, it might not necessarily be up to the standards of some other companies, but personally, I think this game looks great, especially if you're playing on PC or PS5 with the more updated graphics that they've released since this version came out. But I gotta say it, the Switch version of this game is not that awful. It's definitely got some problems, but it's not awful. And I do think if this is the platform that you are on, it is definitely worth checking out at the very least. I could go on about this game forever. All you need to know is that I think this game is a 10 out of 10 RPG that, you know, I think it's timeless. It's going to be a classic that people look back on and go, man, what a great game. Anyways, let's get into it, y'all. Thank you for humoring me. Right off the bat, we'll start with the Switch 2 version. So this version is pretty good. So this game, it's not the cleanest looking, no matter which you're going to be on. More on that in a little bit. Probably towards the end of the video, I'll show the best way to experience these 3D games in particular on your Nintendo Switch or Switch 2. But yeah, in general, this game runs locked 30 FPS on the Switch 2, which you really can't ask for more, unless they were to, you know, release a patch for this game, which I would totally love to see happen, or maybe even an upgrade, because as I mentioned before, the PS5 and PC versions have had a patch that gave them 4K textures and just overall better quality of life improvements. But don't let that dissuade you from this version of the game. It's overall very serviceable and enjoyable on specifically the Switch 2. We're gonna have to look at the Switch 1 now, I guess. Which I don't want to dissuade anyone from getting this on Switch 1. I think it's perfectly fine. Like, you can play this game beginning to end on Switch 1 and not have too bad of a time. It just has really unfortunate frame pacing issues. You'll see frames dipping here and there pretty much consistently throughout the entire adventure. But regardless of these issues, this is still very much a 10 out of 10 game for me. I think a lot more people need to play it. It's just such a phenomenal adventure with such a great cast of characters and incredible music. Falcom's sound team does not mess around with these soundtracks. I'm telling you, they are just bangers from beginning to end. I guess important notes here, 30 FPS is the target for both, and Switch 2 hits it all the time. Which for me personally, that's really what matters here. You know, I have a Switch 2, so it's really cool that I can play this game comfortably without, you know, sitting there getting annoyed, even mildly annoyed by the frame pacing issues that, you know, I was experiencing on the Switch 1. Obviously, it's not a game-breaking deal, you know, it's not going to ruin the entire thing for me, but Switch 2 in general is just the best way to play this game if you are playing on a Nintendo platform. Honestly, this is one of those situations where I think the game is a masterpiece, regardless of platform that you play it on. Honestly, I think more people just need to play Falcom games, and in particular the Ys franchise. Anyways, moving on. That never gets old. So this is Ys 9. This is one of the more recent entries in the series. This is where Falcom kind of got a little more experimental. The game is definitely edgy compared to other Ys games, but it also kind of takes place at what is currently the end of the timeline for Ys. Like, this is, as of right now, the final game in the chronological story order. And on Switch 2, this game, it's locked 30 FPS, like just like with Ys 8. Runs very well. There's no frame pacing issues or anything like that on Switch 2. Combat flows very well, feels really good, great execution, just in general, solid experience. So let's jump right into our first comparison point, the tutorial boss fight. So obviously, you know, the Switch 2 handles this very well. It's very smooth the entire time. Again, no frame pacing issues. Frame rate's a solid locked 30. You know, ideally I would like to see these games running at 60, but I'll take what I can get at this point. Yeah, just generally a good experience. And if we go over to the Switch 1, you're going to find that the boss fight itself is actually not that bad. It performs pretty decently on this hardware. It doesn't quite maintain 30 frames per second all the time. There are some frame pacing issues here and there, but for the most part, it reaches that target pretty well. I'm actually pretty impressed by this, considering this is one of Falcom's kind of iterative engine upgrade games. So, you know, it's nice to see that, you know, this boss fight in particular is very much playable on Switch 1. However, we're about to start seeing some issues with the original Switch model. All right, so we're in the main town of Balduc here, and you'll notice this is a Switch 2, locked 30 frames per second, zero issues with frame pacing or, you know, any of that. Just overall runs pretty well, all things considered. But then we get into the same exact scene on the Nintendo Switch original model. And I mean, I have an OLED model, just I guess for clarification, in case anyone's curious. But as you can see, this is a stuttery mess. Frame pacing is just awful here. I mean, again, it's similar to like Memoir and Celceta, where this is just a town. This doesn't matter, but it does hurt.
Monstrums, the time is nigh. Under the red moons, the wicked and the defiant shall be punished. Ascend into this unbreaking night, unsheath your curse, and smite the darkness.
And that's our segue into something that Ys 9 does that the other Ys games do not, which is these monster battles where you have a larger party of characters fighting against increasingly difficult hordes of enemies. Now, what's really cool about this is that, you know, it's different, it's unique compared to the other entries, and it on Switch 2 runs perfectly fine, maintaining that 30 FPS target, no frame pacing issues whatsoever, just in general, super clean. Really glad that this performs well here, because unfortunately on the original Switch, this is where the game kind of falls apart for me at least. Frame pacing is just, it's atrocious. I mean, I shouldn't say atrocious. It's playable, right? Like, you can still play this and probably enjoy it a good bit, but there's so much micro stutter that occurs, and so much just like, just in general, it just doesn't feel great. And I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to this kind of thing, but I can feel it every time I turn the camera, every time I do a skill on a group of enemies. But it's just not ideal. And I will acknowledge, I am being very nitpicky. It's definitely playable. It's just small micro stutter like that and frame pacing issues do kind of get a little grating to me, simply because I know that the system should have been able to handle this game a bit better than it does. But hey, at least the Switch 2 version is smooth. Ys 10. So this is one of the more recent modern Ys games. It's phenomenal. I actually really like this one a lot. I think the combat is some of the best in the series. And on Switch 2, this game is, you know, it's once again targeting 30 FPS, just like 8 and 9. and it maintains that frame rate like a champ. Like, this game just does such a good job, like, in the performance department, and it looks good. Like, I mean, especially on the Switch too. I just, in general, I've been very impressed with it while playing, and funny enough, this game actually is probably the best in handheld mode. I'll show that a little later, because I think handheld mode for this game is just phenomenal. Like, it actually shocked me on the Switch 2. And I have to admit, on Switch 1, you know, the field environment is actually not that bad either. Like, it performs pretty well in general. There is some minor frame pacing issues with it, but thankfully it's not as noticeable or as rough as it has been in previous entries. I was actually pleasantly surprised by this. I thought it was perfectly playable and enjoyable. Certainly not perfect by any means, but, you know, it'll do. If you're still on Switch 1, you'll still have a pretty good time with this game, at least in the field. Moving on to a boss example, this is on the Switch 2. As you can see, you know, it's still maintaining that frame rate. It's hitting its target. There's little to no frame pacing issues present, which, you know, is ideal for a game like this. You want to be in as much control as possible at all times, and this game just, it feels phenomenal to play on Switch 2. For some reason, I forgot to record Switch 1. However, all you really need to know is that it's pretty solid. Very minor frame pacing issues. So anyways, moving on to the next little section here. So you're kind of fighting through this village that's burning. And on Switch 2, this, of course, is running perfectly fine. Locked 30 FPS, no frame pacing issues whatsoever. And the cool thing is, all things considered, the Switch 1 actually handles this scene pretty well, like, you know, in general. There's some minor frame pacing. One weird thing that I noticed was when I level up right here, there is like a bit of a micro stutter that's pretty brutal. Like, it actually surprised me when it happened when I was playing. I was like, what the heck? Like, why did that happen? Like, the level up text, I guess, was just a little bit too much for the original Switch. Before it started just, you know, having some frame pacing issues. Of course, you know, it's, again, this is one of those situations where it isn't perfect, but it is serviceable and enjoyable enough to where I think anyone playing this version of the game on, you know, original Switch hardware is not going to have a bad time. Now, interestingly, going into the little boss of this segment, I mean, it's not really a boss. You basically have to fight this character until a certain point of their health bar where they stop fighting you altogether. This is on Switch 1. It's pretty decent, actually. There are some micro stutters here and there, and there definitely is a lot of frame pacing issues that do occur during this fight. But honestly, like, I was able to block and parry a lot of her attacks, so honestly, I don't think it's that bad. Like, I think you could enjoy this and have a generally good time. And of course, it goes without saying that on Switch 2, this fight is practically flawless, like locked 30, no frame pacing issues whatsoever. I'm sure you get the point by now. You're probably tired of hearing me say the Switch 2 version is just, you know, better. And I do mildly want to make this comparison because this little boss fight here does end in a cutscene that on Switch 2, as you can see, you know, it looks fine. It runs relatively smoothly. Not anything too crazy here. Just looks good. Smooth animation for 30 FPS, you know. And then you come over to the Switch 1, and this scene is significantly more choppy to look at. Like, it obviously has frame pacing issues. Just really, oh, it's so rough. But you know what, at least that's just a cutscene kind of thing. Like, it's not like gameplay or anything major, you know. And similar to how Monstrum Nox had a unique gameplay system, VIII Nordics has a really neat addition. This is the first time Adol has ever had a boat that has not sunk in the first 5 minutes. So yeah, you get to sail in this game, and it's pretty neat. On Switch 2, this runs pretty much as best as it's going to at a locked 30 FPS with no frame pacing issues whatsoever. Just in general, looks okay, you know. Naval combat is definitely an aspect of this game that I think a lot of people never expected to see in an East game. But, you know, here it's respectable. It's not bad. Like, it's pretty good. And I think they came up with a really unique and interesting way to handle the naval combat. Yeah, on Switch 2, this is pretty much flawless, about as good as it's gonna get. Now, heading over to Switch 1, this is unfortunately a bit of a problem child. So you'll probably notice it here and there during this recording, but frame pacing issues are definitely abundant, and especially if you use the little boost, it kind of causes some really bad choppiness in performance. I mean, this aspect of the game is, I mean, yeah, it's a cool gimmick that they added. You know, I like that this was added to it, but it's not necessarily what I consider the most important aspect of it, so I kind of give it a little bit of a pass. What's really interesting is, despite the performance issues when boosting, combat is actually pretty smooth in general. Like, I didn't really have any issues with it on Switch 1. It's like, yeah, there's obviously some drop frames here and there, and there's definitely some frame pacing issues. I mean, that's pretty much par for the course at this point. The point I want to get to is that you can indeed play this game and enjoy it to the fullest, even with the slight issues that it does have on Switch 1. Switch 2 is definitely still preferable, but Switch 1 is not a bad time. But yeah, with all that being said, the really cool thing about these games in particular is that they are just excellent to play in handheld mode on the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, these games, they look and play so much better for some reason this way. I don't know if it's just because of the display itself, or maybe some, you know, VRR is being taken into account. But yeah, these games, they just feel so smooth and such a blast in handheld mode. I think it is one of those things where, like, on Switch 1, the handheld mode didn't really feel all that great, and it's, you know, probably also because the game's playing at a lower resolution compared to docked, but it's certainly an improvement, and in my opinion, it is one of the best ways to play the 3D East games. Just very smooth, very responsive, and they look great. Like, they really do look solid. East 8 in particular, it makes sense because, you know, it was originally playable on the Vita, so, you know, it makes a little bit of sense that it would look good here on a handheld. But East 10, like, it's really impressive just how clean the game is on there. You know, I honestly can't imagine popping this into a large TV and playing it. Either play it on a monitor that's, like, you know, decent size, or, you know, pop it in handheld mode and just kind of enjoy it. It's honestly one of the best cases I can give for you know, why you would want to play the Switch portably, or Switch 2 in particular. So yeah, it's just really nice to see these games running as well as they do on a handheld device that's, you know, not a Steam Deck or a Legion Go. You know, like, this is running on a Nintendo handheld, so it's pretty impressive in my book. So yeah, this video took a little bit longer than I would have liked in order to make it, but I feel like it was worth it. Going through these games, is comparing how they are on Switch 2 and Switch 1 it was just fun. It was a little different for me, and I really look forward to seeing more games in, like, Falcom's lineup. You know, maybe just maybe I'll do the Trails games that are on the Nintendo Switch next, if there's a demand for it. Anyways, if you liked it, yeah, just give me a like and consider subscribing. We stream almost nightly. We're doing Donkey Kong Bonanza right now. I am going to be streaming through the East games. I've already done book 1, looking into doing book 2 next, hopefully here soon. But yeah, it's a good time. We're gonna do those in story order, so that's gonna be fun. Yeah, and I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next time.